Thank you very much, Stella. That was excellent. And now group 6 is up on tap here.
Okay, so we have a couple more presentations and we'll get to the discussions. Okay, group 6. Our group 6 worked on anti-trafficking legislation. So they tried to compare what is happening at international and national level and what kind of traces we have of common approaches. Okay.
Hello, my name is Matthew Matese, and we are Group 6. I'd first like to thank everybody for being here today.
You get closer to the microphone.
Thank you, everybody, for being here today.
Yeah, this is good.
I find it compelling that even though we have different languages, cultures, and live so far apart, we still face the same challenges. Our group is covering legislation. We live in the state of Florida, and Florida is important for the human trafficking cases because currently it is 3rd in the United States for having problems with human trafficking.
Microphone connection, something is happening. Microphone connection. Excuse us, but we are losing you.
Can you hear me now?
This is perfect. Yeah.
Okay. Florida is important because we have a tourism industry that, with the hospitality interest, you have an influx of tourists and an influx of a labor force, and also a large influx of money. We also have a great deal of agriculture, which leads to human smuggling. Because people bring in migrant workers, and there's difficulty with the documentation of the workers.
Microphone, sorry.
And illegal immigration. In Florida, we also have a sex industry that includes exotic dancing, massage parlors, lingerie shops, and pornography. And one thing that we also share in common with Moldova is currently our economy in the state of Florida is not very good, and we have one of the higher unemployment rates in the United States. The original Florida legislation came from the
Something's happening. Are you cupping the microphone, maybe? With your fingers.
Okay. I'll just set it down. Is that better? Is that better?
Yeah, please. Sorry about that.
That's okay. The original legislation came from the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000.
Maybe concentrate on speaking and they lose. Yeah, that's okay.
In Florida created their own legislation to deal with their human trafficking problems. As you guys can see on the slides, Chapter 787 basically redefines what human trafficking is. It also includes details, which I think is one of the most important areas, which is education for law enforcement, prosecutors, and judges. Human smuggling is another area, and it is a first-degree misdemeanor offense. Forced labor, which is the part that deals with the human trafficking, is a second-degree felony. One thing that I found interesting about Florida's laws is that after 787 came into fruition, they put in 402.87, and that provided resources for victims. That includes monetary resources, a place to stay, and help with getting their visas while they're waiting for testimony or the corroboration. Another interesting fact about Florida human trafficking laws is that they can now be prosecuted under the U.S. federal RICO laws, and that is the Racketeering, Influenced, Corrupt Organizations Act. And what's important about that is through the federal government, you can do far more investigating through the RICO laws.
Yeah. Can you briefly go through, because I know you have a long presentation. The longest one, I think.
Yeah,
All right, guys.
just loud and clear.
I'm gonna go over the broad spectrum over this, and I'm doing the American legislation, pretty much. It's actually established like between or estimated 14,000, 18,000 people are trafficked in the U.S. annually, and like Matt said, Florida is the third largest out of the states that third largest out of states that have the highest what's called trafficking in America. Second comes California, then Hawaii, and just because we're water bordering states, that's what encourages us to have like trafficking more often. And the first act that America started was a Trafficking Victims Prevention Act of 2000. And what it did was enforce federal funding to put a stop to trafficking in America. And $95 million was put together within 2 years for this act. And it enforced laws to take traffickers to punish them severely. And they're able to even have like life in prison. Oh yeah, this act also allowed like grants for trafficking victims, like to give them like housing protection and rehabilitation, in case to like let them better off on their feet after being trafficked. All right, this actually reauthorized 3 different times, and they reauthorized it in 2003, and it created the special watch list. And what it did was it kept pressures on other countries to make sure trafficking is strictly enforced like everywhere else. And it also had contract-related international affairs. Once again, it was reauthorized in 2005, and it created $50 million within the next 2 years. It directed towards the FBI. Okay. And on to Kristen. Sorry. No worries.
Okay, do we still have a couple more minutes for Moldovan?
Yes.
Dmitry is not here actually. Can you move a couple slides and I will tell you briefly what's happening. So they looked through European Union legislation, through UN legislation, through and national legislation acts. Next slide. Yeah, just a brief information for the audience. So we have here legislators working on the primacy of human rights issues. So within human rights issue, we have this issue of human trafficking, which was also based on trafficking principles and guidelines adopted in 2002 by United Nations Human Rights Office. Okay, so we are basing our legislation on this very important document. And so we legislators took in mind those root causes, victims' issues, and also prosecution and punishment. Specific, nothing new under the sun, I would say. So those principles are present in each country for this legislation issue. So we have here a bit of information on what kind of law, what kind of legislation Moldova adopted on human trafficking, but specifically during the last, I would say, the last 10 years. Not previous information, so you have an updated information on what's happening right now. Okay, and very briefly, human trafficking is seen more and more as a public issue. So we have agencies and NGOs, so all together working on what is what we call now division of activities. And November 2, it was an international conference I took part in, and United Nations, the head office, human rights, Mrs. Pillai came to Moldova for the first time since independence, and she talked about the fact that Moldovan legislation is just perfect. We need to implement it. This is a problem. We need all the agencies, all the bodies which are responsible for a certain segment needs to work properly all together in order to overcome those important issues. Thank you. I think we can move to the next group. Sorry, Dmitry was not able to come, but I want to emphasize that he was really working hard on legislative issues, specifically that we are not law students here, so it was a little bit difficult, I would say, for us.
His major was law.
His major is law. Okay. So no, it's political, economical